And we welcome you to this mid-season podcast right here on d2easthoops.org. Tim McCaffrey here, and we're joined by Steve Zerdellian as we talk about the women's region and all that fun stuff. And we thank you, Steve, for giving us a few minutes of your time.
My pleasure, Tim. Thank you very much for having me. Well,
Steve, we're going to do this. We're going to have fun here today. We're going to go down the rankings, my definitive top 13. Obviously, nobody disagrees with that. So we'll just take the teams one by one. I think right at this moment, we have a clear number one in Adelphi.
There's really no question. Obviously, they're the only undefeated team in the region, so that's an early indication that they're a good team. But you also look at who they played, and their schedule is pretty good. They've got quality wins. They've beaten Pace and Malloy and Sciences. Those are good wins. They've been convincing in most of their wins. They did have an overtime win at East Stroudsburg. So they've built a good resume against a pretty solid, if not spectacular, schedule so far. But they do, to me, and I think to a lot of other people, right now, look like the best team in the region.
Now, after number one, things get a little more muddled. As you look at about 2 to 6, you can make cases for a lot of teams in a lot of spots. Right now, I have St. Anselm as the number 2. So let's talk about them.
I like St. Anselm. They obviously are the defending regional champions, so there's a lot to like there. This group generally knows how to win. And I think they have the best duo in the region in Shannon Ryan and Peyton Steinman. I mean, they're averaging 45 points between the pair. Everybody knows how good Ryan is. She's had 9 double-doubles in a row this season in 9 games. But I think people underestimate just how good Peyton Steinman is. She's as good an all-around player in the region. Dropped 30-plus in Florida, even though they lost 2 games in a row. This is a team that's a little bit top-heavy. The other starters fill their roles very well. Sarah Messler is an experienced front-court player. Grace Guacchione has stayed healthy this year, and she adds a perimeter shooting element. And freshman guard Macy Spinks rounds out a good top 5. The question comes when you talk about depth, and St. Anselm doesn't quite have as much as Adelphi. When I compare the two, Adelphi has, I'd say, up to 7 or 8 players that are plus players that you can look at and say, that player can get 20 in this game within the context of the offense, whereas I'm not sure you can say that about St. Anselm. So it's an interesting dichotomy between the two. And, of course, they're going to face each other in a couple of weeks in Manchester. That game's going to go a long way in determining a variety of things in the region.
And not only that, but, Steve, St. A's plays Bentley twice. And, they have a lot of chances to get quality wins, but they also have a lot of chances to lose, as opposed to another team ranked 3rd in my rankings that also has a great duo, maybe even the second best in the region, but they have a lot of chances to pick up wins against bad teams and get a lot of wins, 20-25 probably, and that's the University of the Sciences in Philadelphia.
Well, you just hit on one of the main topics that we have in this region, is that the Northeast 10 teams have multiple opportunities to get those quality wins. And if they lose one of those games, it's not a killer. They can make it up by winning others. For Sciences and teams in the CACC and the East Coast Conference, the non-conference games are so critical for them to build their resume. Sciences habitually plays a great schedule. They don't win them all. They've lost to Adelphi and Stonehill, but they have beaten Bentley and Malloy. They've got a huge game against St. Thomas Aquinas coming up on January 3rd. And this is a team that also knows how to win in a variety of circumstances. Their question is depth as well. They've got 2 terrific players in Jordan Vitelli and Aritha Yee. The question, though, with Sciences also comes up with, can their support players give those 2 enough help so that they can flourish in the CACC, which is really how they build their winning record in addition to the non-conference teams.
We talk about as close to a lock as Adelphi is. Obviously, injuries can happen. A lot of things can happen. But Sciences, their non-conference strength of schedule, number 1 in the region, as usual, 71-33, their opponents' records. They haven't played a team with a losing record non-conference. And they've got good wins, as you know, and that should be enough. Even if they do have a couple of defeats in the league, they've got a lot of stock already invested. And I'll tell you one thing: that loss to Holy Family on the road is looking better and better as the year goes on.
Well, it's true. I mean, maybe we can touch on Holy Family a little bit later on. They're a little bit of a surprise. They've gotten off to a great start so far in the CACC. They're fourth in conference play. Holy Family's not the kind of a team that has a non-conference resume that's going to get them an at-large bid. Frankly, the only CACC team that has that is Sciences, which makes it very interesting if Sciences does not win the automatic qualifier from that league, but that's another question for another day.
So the demise of the Bentley Falcons has been greatly exaggerated. A team that one coach told me they thought, this team might not make the NCAA tournament this year. Yeah, I think they're going to be okay. 9-3 currently, ranked number 4th in the latest McCaffrey's Musings.
And when you look at their non-conference schedule as well, it's very good. You know, the cumulative record of their opponents that they've beaten is the best among the teams in the region that have 67% winning percentages or better. They play a good non-conference schedule. Obviously, they play in a challenging league. And they're hot now. They've won 5 in a row, all against teams that are either 500 or better. This is a team that has evolved from last year. Some new personnel have helped them. I think the addition of 2 guards, freshman Ella Thompson and sophomore transfer Kari Brecky, has really bolstered their scoring from the perimeter. When you add to who they have, I think the key for Bentley is, can they consistently get enough scoring to be successful? And because they had a difficult time at the end of last year, it was almost inconceivable that they had 2 terrible offensive games to end the season. But I think they're in a little better shape this year, assuming they stay healthy. Obviously, you've got a Hall of Fame coach, and you've got a system that knows how to produce when things matter. So Bentley may not be at the front of the queue when we start talking about who the best team is and regional hosts, but I can guarantee you this, probably nobody wants to play them in the NCAA tournament because you know exactly how they're going to play.
Let me ask you a question. Is it possible that a coach that will eventually be in the Basketball Hall of Fame, not the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame, which is a great honor in and of itself, but in the Basketball Hall of Fame, Barbara Stevens, is underrated? When you think that some people thought this team was just going to be a middling, third place, is it possible that she doesn't get enough credit for doing what she does year in and year out?
You can certainly make that argument. Sometimes when you have a coach of such excellence, it becomes routine and it becomes expected, and you don't necessarily appreciate how great they are. A good example going back a few years, I think, was John Wooden, because he produced unbelievable teams at UCLA, but it just became routine, and people started to expect it. So sometimes when a program has such long-standing consistency and that kind of success, yes, it can be taken for granted, and maybe that's the case here. And I can probably say that she wouldn't mind being overlooked a little bit and just getting on with the business of preparing and playing the games. Coaches don't really care to be in the limelight, and she just wants to get on with her business. She's got a good enough team that can compete on the floor with anybody.
Malloy, the Lions are a very interesting squad. Joe Pellicane, as usual, schedules well outside the league. If you look at their record, they are actually 10-3 because the loss against Stony Brook, a game that was a lot closer than it could have been, doesn't count as far as the Division II team page goes. So the losses this year for Malloy are a very quality loss against Sciences, another quality defeat at Adelphi, and a bad loss, what could be an okay loss, but it looks like a bad loss now against Jefferson. And remember, the scores don't matter. The score was 65-35, but they don't matter. They've got quality wins against Stonehill and Bentley. They've got a lot of money in the bank. They've got a couple tough games coming up. But what is it going to take for Malloy to move up or move down? I think they're going to be solidly in the NCAA tournament because they're in the ECC, and they're going to get a lot of games that are cupcakes coming up.
They really put themselves in a good position to get an at-large bid if they don't win the ECC. There's just a couple swing games in the conference that are going to determine whether they're guaranteed in or whether they have to kind of be a bubble team. And obviously, those are the games against St. Thomas Aquinas and Damon and maybe New York Tech down the line. But this Malloy team has a couple of elements they didn't have last year. Number one is they have some health. Number two is they added 3 players that have really moved the needle for them. A couple of guards in Khadijah Dixon and Giola Beth Perez, and a wing player from LIU Post and Robin Francis. So you add players who have experience, who give that team the things they don't have last year, or they didn't have last year, some speed and some perimeter scoring. All of a sudden, you add in the typical Joe Pellicane elements of playing hard for 40 minutes and defending and rebounding really well, this becomes a tough team to handle. And they're another team that they can potentially beat anybody on their schedule. And I do mean anybody. They've already shown that they can do that. You could flip a coin between Malloy and St. Thomas Aquinas right now for who the best team in the ECC is. I'll leave the records aside. It'll be interesting to see what happens when those two teams play each other, and they'll meet in a couple of weeks in early January in the first of two games.
Now Kim Lusk and the Stack Spartans, who I currently have 6, they generally play a pretty tough schedule. I think some of the teams that they played this year, they had return games with, were not as good as they expected. I think they thought Georgian Court was going to turn a corner and be, after last year's run, and be pretty good. It hasn't turned out that way. Goldie Beacom, another team they played on the road, has struggled. But they had a really tough loss at home against Bentley, where Bentley was on a T form. Bentley had just lost at Malloy. They were coming on the second day of a back-to-back, and they pretty much got smoked by him at home. It was a turning point, what could be a turning point for them, not only getting a top seed, but also maybe making the NCAA tournament. A loss at Southern Connecticut. Steinhauer, Southern Connecticut Owls' best player, did not play in that game, and still Stack couldn't muster a victory against a team that's really struggling. Where do you see Stack lining up come tournament time?
Well, I think they have to take care of their business in the East Coast Conference first and foremost. If they do that, they should be fine. They've got enough wins out of the league to push them forward. They do have a good win in beating Pace. They beat Damon in their first meeting this season. So as long as they don't stumble too much in conference play, they should be okay. They do have two pretty important games at home coming up after the break against Sciences and New Haven. So that's really an opportunity for the Spartans to bolster their resume big time if they can win, if not one, both of those games. If they can win both of those games, Tim, unless they completely collapse in the league, I think they're in a really strong position for an at-large bid. If they drop them, then you might be talking bubble unless they really run the table in the East Coast Conference. This is a team that, as you said, schedules pretty well, and Kim Lusk's team is not, they're not an eye opener. You don't look at them and say, oh, they have these great players, and I want to see them play. They just get on with their business. They have multiple players who can lead them offensively, which is good. But if one or two get shut down, they have some difficulty scoring. Their bottom line is defend and rebound well and win those games that you can win. That's going to get them to the 20-win mark. And if they're in the top 2 in the ECC, they'll probably get in the field.
Now, as we get down to 7, I have Stonehill in that spot where they are currently 7-4. But the game against Ave Maria doesn't count, so we're looking at 6-4. They have a quality win, a great win in a neutral site game against Sciences, but they don't have much else on the resume at this point. They're going to have plenty of opportunities to get quality wins, and this is a team that Trish Brown has been holding together with duct tape and bubble gum. They're starting to get a little more healthy. Can Stonehill make a run at the Northeast Division or the NE10, or do they settle in somewhere in the middle?
Well, I think of the teams that are sort of on the fringe in the NE10 right now, they probably have the best chance, simply because, as you said, Tim, they're starting to get healthy. They just got Kayla Raymond back for a couple of games, and she's got to round into form. They're hopeful of getting Jenny Warden back as well. Those two at pretty much full strength would really make a significant difference for Stonehill. Yeah, they need to get some quality wins. They're aware of that. It's going to be difficult to crack the top 2 because they've already lost to St. Anselm and Bentley. And if you're in third place in the division, you're probably bubble territory. But again, as you said, the opportunities are going to be there in the crossover games against the likes of Adelphi, Pace, New Haven, Southern Connecticut. They got 2 games left against Southern New Hampshire. There's plenty of opportunities for the Skyhawks to build their resume and find themselves in the field. It's going to be basically impossible for the Northeast 10 to get 6 teams in the field. It's mathematically possible, but the realistic chances are no. The question for the NE10 is, can they get 5 teams in the field? If they can, then a Stonehill can elbow their way into the discussion pretty quickly with a couple of key wins.
After the New Haven Chargers play Goldie Beacom, their non-conference strength of schedule will be 16-48. It is hard to imagine having a schedule that void of decent teams. Now, they do play Stack on the road coming up. That almost turns into a must-win because at some point, New Haven's got to get a quality victory. I happen to like the Chargers a lot. I think they're one of the 8 best teams in the region, but they've left a very tight margin of error. for their season going forward.
Well, you're right about that. Of their 9 wins, only 2 of them are against plus 500 teams, and one is a 6-5 Lemoyne team, and one is a 7-4 Southern Connecticut team. At least they're conference wins, and they put those teams behind them. I do like them. I think they have some good elements. They have some good perimeter players, and Cameron DeBose and Bree Pergola. Michael Womack's been playing well in the paint, and the addition of freshman Aurora Deshays has really helped that team as well. Like a few other teams, I think on the floor, the question is, are they going to be able to score enough? Because at some point, you're going to find opponents are going to be able to match you defensively in the NE10, and they're going to have to find a way to score and win those kind of games. They tend to play fairly close games. I think they are one of the best 8 teams, but it's not proven yet. So they're still from Missouri. They still have to show everybody with results that they're going to actually be one of those teams in the field. If I'm a Charger fan, I'm excited about their prospects because I think they are a good team, and I think in the end they're going to prove it. But until it happens, you still have a little question mark lingering above their heads.
Pace is a team that I've seen in person a couple of times, Steve, and another team that I like, but they play up to their competition and then they play down to their competition. It's just if you're going to make the NCAA tournament, you gotta beat the middle of the road teams and beat them like a drum. They were in the fourth quarter against Dominican until Dominican stopped scoring. They lost a game at Post. Now Post has improved, but still, if Pace is looking to make an NCAA tournament, it's a game you got to win. But then again, they were in it down the stretch against Adelphi, and Adelphi is the clear number 1 in the region. That combined with a strength of schedule that is not going to be as good as they need it to be with games against Felician and Concordia and Mercy in the non-conference and Bridgeport and Caldwell. These are all teams that are really struggling. Pace needs to start winning some games, and they need to win games in a hurry. And when you're talking about a team that is currently 9-3, they might need 20 or 1 or 22 wins and 4 or 5 ones of quality to make the NCAA tournament.
They're a lot like New Haven in that sense. They just don't have a lot of quality wins on their resume. In fact, their only quality win right now is a win over New Haven. So they're going to get the opportunity in the NE10 to do that as well. They don't have non-conference games left that are going to be really challenging. The only one left they have is a game against Caldwell, which is a team that's struggling. So their fate is still to be determined. I like their trio of Jackie Delasanti, Lauren Shetter, and Lauren Hackett. That's a really good trio of players that have been dependable all season long. But they're going to have to find a way to get those marquee wins. Remember, a couple of years ago, they started off really well, and then they just flatlined after that. So somebody's going to take a hit somewhere along the line in the NE10. Pace is a team that you can look at and say, well, what have they actually proven so far? Yeah, they got a win over New Haven. Then again, that was a 55-45 game. So, we'll see. We'll see how that shakes out. They've got some challenges ahead. They've given themselves a good starting point to be an NCAA challenger, but they're going to have to get some good wins if they're really going to find a way to get an at-large bid. And
for those teams from the Southwest Division, the crossover matchups are going to be huge because when you're getting a chance to play the Southern New Hampshires and the Bentleys and the Stonehills and St. A's, one of those teams isn't going to, somebody from the Southwest might be able to step. I think it's more likely we find out once again how much better the Northeast Division is than the Southwest Division. But that's why those crossover matchups are fun. It's almost you find out what the best divisions are as opposed to the best conferences. Let's skip ahead. And another team that's been off a lot of people's radars, but never yours or mine, Assumption. Always relevant, and they always pick up a couple of good wins every season.
Yeah, they usually do. I mean, they're a team that's always going to compete, and they'll get players that step into bigger roles and do well. This year it's Brianna Cappuccioni and Jalen Armstrong who've done that. They've got a nice freshman I like in Monica Spain. The question for them is, you're looking at the Northeast Division. Well, right now they're 4th or 5th in the pecking order behind Bentley, St. Anselm, Stonehill, and maybe Southern New Hampshire. So, although they do have a win over Southern New Hampshire, which is going to help them, they're going to have to get some of those wins, and they're going to have to take 2 or 3 steps up in order to be really in the discussion. The fringe teams in the NE10, quote unquote fringe, we're talking about teams that are going to have winning records and teams that are probably going to finish 3rd, 4th, or 5th in their division. Still good teams, but the numbers just don't work. You've got to find a way up the ladder, and that's Assumption's challenge now.
So, speaking of Southern New Hampshire, 8-4 record, dropped them down a spot in my poll this week, and they don't play a good non-conference schedule year in and year out, Steve, and they don't tend to win games on the road in their league against teams that are of quality. So, kind of, they've been in that range the last few years of being between 10 and 13. Do you see that changing?
Not right now. I mean, when you look at the schedule so far, they lost by 10 at Assumption. They lost a heartbreaker in a game that they had against St. Anselm, and they were within 1 point of Bentley in the fourth quarter. Those are 3 of their 4 losses. They also lost a bad game at Georgian Court to start the season. Quality wins, well, they just kind of don't have any right now. Their best win is against St. Mike's, and that was a 12-point win back at the beginning of December. So a lot like some of the teams we've been talking about in the Southwest Division. The opportunities are going to be there for Southern New Hampshire. They can't wait around. There's no room for error. They've got to get some of those wins. They have a good team. I will say that, despite the loss of the graduation of Kylie Lorenzen, their all-time leading scorer last year. I like a lot of their pieces. I think Gianna Russell has taken a step up. They've got some good experienced guards, and they have a really nice freshman I like in Adriana Timberlake. But where are those key wins? If they don't get them, it's going to be another one of those glass ceiling seasons for Southern New Hampshire. 15, 16, 17 wins, and you're done by the end of February.
So we mentioned that Jackie Hartzell in Sciences 71-33 record, non-league affairs. Well, Damon's kind of the opposite. They just don't play anybody, non-conference, and the result is I've got them all the way down at 12th. Now they're 10-3. I moved them a spot up in the rankings this week, but the bottom line is their best win. They've only played 4 teams with winning records. Their non-conference opponents outside the league that they've defeated are 25-62, and the best win they have overall is a game against Roberts Wesleyan, and that doesn't move the needle for me at all. No offense to the fans of Roberts.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I like Damon. I think they have some good players, and they would have really benefited by beefing up their schedule big time. At this point, either they go undefeated the rest of the year, which would mean that they have a chance to win the ECC, or they're not going on in the NCAA tournament. It's just there's just not enough. There's not enough meat on the bones there. They've already lost to St. Thomas Aquinas in one of those key ECC games. So when you look at their schedule and you see, they've got another game against them. They've got 2 games against Malloy. It almost becomes mandatory to win at least 2, if not all 3 of those games, get a high seed, and try to change some perceptions based on how they stand relative to Malloy and St. Thomas Aquinas, whose non-league records or non-league opposition is far superior. It's unfortunate that Damon doesn't have the kind of resume building pieces that they need to really make themselves a legitimate contender, but the fact is they just don't. So all the eggs may be in the win the ECC tournament bracket, and it's possible. They are not. They're capable of that. And they've got a really good player in Katie Titus and some good supporting players like Caroline White and Jordan Heinold. It's a good team. I'd like to see them against better opposition just to see where they fit in relatively in the region.
And for those people who just rank the teams based on record, you compare Damon and Malloy according to the NCAA formula, it's not close. Malloy dominates Damon. You compare other teams, it's not close. You have to play people. Your performance indicator is low. And as I said in the musings this past week, if Damon played Sciences non-conference schedule, they would be. I think the record was 1-9. I mean, it's just it is what it is. But in order to measure yourself against the other teams, you have to go play people. Now, I understand some coaches are trying to build a program, but I think everybody thought that Damon was on the precipice of making a run for the NCAA tournament this year. This isn't a surprise to you or me, but at some point you have to challenge yourself. Now, they've gone on the road and played neutral sites, although Rochester's not far from Buffalo, but they have painted themselves in a corner, Steve, in my opinion, that they have to distinguish themselves from Malloy by sweeping them. They might get them in the conference semifinals. They might have to beat them again, and that way they could lose to Stack at home. But they might have to win every 50-50 game that they play the rest of the season, and that's a lot of pressure on a team. Now,
I think they will have to do that, and unless they do that and basically sweep the rest of their season or very close to it, there's just no way they're going to get an at-large bid. I mean, it's unfortunate. But they have to start thinking in terms of transitioning their program from being one that, hey, we're building a Division II program to, hey, let's take that next step and be a true challenger, play the other good teams in the region, and really give ourselves a chance to compete at that level.
Now, I like rooting for the teams that have never really done anything in the region. One of those teams is Post. They're in Connecticut. They're in Waterbury. You might be familiar with them. You might not be. But John Plefka is building something that has not been done in with this program ever. You got to understand, not only have they never made an NCAA tournament, they have never won a conference tournament game. Okay, they're 8-2 right now. In reality, they're 7-2 because the win against Cheney doesn't matter. But again, can't get on for their schedule because they're trying to build a program. And that's what you do. You try to schedule games you know you can win so you can get players in. That being said, Post is the kind of team that may have to win out in the regular season in order to get at-large consideration, and that would be one of the more amazing feats of all time.
It's a nice story for sure. I think we can just dispel the thoughts that they're going to get an at-large bid. That's not going to happen. They're going to have to win the the CACC playoffs to get an automatic qualifier bid. They have a puncher's chance. There's no pressure on them whatsoever. They've got an explosive scorer in Taylor Williams, who's got 3 30-point games already this year. They're interesting, and the CACC is not loaded with strong programs. So they're a team that can do some damage, and if they get hot at the right time, they could definitely be a surprise. And I can tell you who's not rooting for Post. It's all the teams on the fence in the NE10 and the ECC. They do not want anybody other than Sciences winning that automatic qualifier from the CACC. If you're a fan of the fairy tale of the programs coming out of nowhere, you definitely want to root for the Eagles to have some success here and at least make their way to the CACC Final Four and see what can happen.
In the year 2000, Bernadette Lakaitis graduated from Holy Family, one of the school's all-time best players under then head coach Mike McLaughlin. She was then mentored by McLaughlin at Penn as assistant coach with the Quakers. She comes back to Holy Family and is very quietly turning the program in the right direction. Only 3 teams are doing records in the CAC, and Holy Family, we mentioned them earlier, is that other team.
Yeah, they got a win over Sciences, which is a huge validation for the program going forward. They have some holdover players who are pretty solid players. I mean, I like Elizabeth Radley. I like Casey Schweitzer and Angela Hayes. They got a really exciting freshman in Mo Moore who can score, which is obviously a nice talent to have. They're not a soft touch. They're going to play hard. They just don't have enough depth to last a full season and really be a challenger. But again, given the fact that the league is down even relative to last year, this is a team that could finish in the top 2 in the South Division. They could get to the Final Four and have some fun with it. And it's a great starting point for Bernadette Lakaitis. I think she's done a very nice job with that group, and I'd be excited if I'm a Holy Family fan going forward.
So let's talk about 2 teams with winning records in the ECC, and a team that you could never really look past because they're always relevant, they always play hard, and they made the NCAA tournament last season and gave Sciences a heck of a game. They're 7-7 right now. New York Tech.
It's been a tough season for the Bears in terms of injuries and getting people healthy, and they played a fairly challenging schedule. There's really no chance they're going to get an at-large bid, but just like last season for Kenny Parham's team, it's about being ready to play in the postseason. They are certainly a team that has the capability of winning the East Coast Conference Championship. Katsia Theis has been a terrific player in the post. Meg Nolmeyer is also a solid player there, and they've got some experienced perimeter players. They are a team that carries a lot of danger with them. They just haven't found the cohesion so far this year to string together wins. But they'll get in the ECC tournament, and they'll be a tough draw.
I wanted to mention Mercy really quick. 6-6 is the schedule as we go to the new year. You have to understand, covering this region, and you know this, Steve, and I'm talking to the fans out there. Mercy sometimes won 6 games in 3 years. So the fact that they've been relevant this year and been competitive, they've won at Holy Family. It's just, I'm happy for them. I'm happy for the program. They do the most with the least right now, and maybe they can get some momentum rolling. There's one other team with a winning record in the ECC, and that's Roberts Wesleyan. And I only mention them because they just won 2 games against West Florida and St. Leo down in Florida, and they were competitive games. And it's always tough when you get those officials down there to win basketball games. But they've won 3 in a row, all away from home, and they're 7-5, and that's could be a turning point for the program.
Yeah, I mean they've still got some players there. Sarah Nady and Emily Miller are solid veterans, and Taryn Wilson has stepped up into a more prominent role this year. Sure, I mean, if they can get in the field, yeah, they have enough ability to scare somebody. And good for Mercy, too. It's good to see teams that do struggle to have some modicum of success, and we appreciate seeing that. And kudos to Amber Brown and Katie Wall for the Mavericks for having good seasons so far.
I wanted to mention a couple of other teams here. You can sense, even though they're winless in the Northeast Division, they're going to pick up a couple of wins this year. I wanted to mention St. Michael's and Franklin Pierce. I just have a feeling that these two teams are on the rise. They're in a tough division to be in, but I don't see them being in the basement forever.
It's a tough division to be in for sure. I mean, St. Michael's has one of the league's best unknown players, I think, in Brianna Purcell, who leads the country in assists. She's got 2 triple-doubles this season. If you get a chance to see her play, you won't be sorry. That she's a fun one to watch. And Franklin Pierce, under the direction of former and now, again, current head coach Mark Swayze, very young team last year, still pretty young and learning about how to win games. And they're taking small steps forward. And I think it won't be all that much further along in their development, whether it's next year or the year after, that you're going to see Franklin Pierce show the benefits of that, the youth and the experience, and move up the standings. But they're no soft touch right now. You have to play 40 minutes to beat them.
I think a team that's going to be a tough out when they get healthy, if they can trend to get healthy, make the NE10 tournament, it's going to be Lemoyne. They have one of the best players in the region, and they're 6-5, and they're clearly banged up, and they're not the same team that they were last year, but they're still relevant in my mind, Steve.
They're good enough, for sure. I mean, Michaela Roberts is an outstanding player, and they do have other good pieces around her. I think Jenna Zimmerman's had a good sophomore season so far. The problem is that they haven't had a lot of interior play after graduating Corinne Batavian. Again, you're right, they're also banged up, and all teams go through injuries, and it's affected Lemoyne as well. Not going to get an at-large bid unless they suddenly get really, really hot. But, yeah, you get them in the playoffs, and you're not going to want to face them. They're going to be a hard team to deal with. Defending champions don't go down easily.
And the last team, Southern Connecticut State. I don't know how Kate Lynch does it. It seems like at the end of the year she ends up going with the Herb McGee approach of having 5 players play for 40 minutes. This year, no exception, with Kaylee Steinhauer out for the time being. They are 7-4, but they've won 3 in a row, including a big victory over St. Thomas Aquinas. They will have a chance to get quality wins in a down Southwest division. Do they have any chance of making a run, especially without Steinhauer?
Yeah, I'm not sure. They're going to have to get her back to be complete. I mean, they've got some good perimeter players. I like how Jessica Fresley has played this year. But without Steinhauer, there's only so much they can do. But they did show that they're capable by beating St. Thomas Aquinas. And another team that you look at on paper and say, well, they're 4th or 5th place in the division. They can't be that good. But you know what? You watch them play, and they're a pretty good team. So they're another one. If they can get Steinhauer back and healthy, they become a little powder keg when you play them. And it's no fun to go to Moore Fieldhouse and take on a team that's that well coached and that plays hard all the time.
And their current MO without Steinhauer is take threes. I mean, they're going to take, nearly 60, sometimes more, 70% of their shots for the Owls are 3-point shots. So, if you're making your threes, you're going to win some basketball games. And if you're not, you're going to have some ugly results. It kind of evens the playing field a little bit. I want to mention, Steve, here's an opportunity for you to tell me, so far in your region, your Rookie of the Year, your Coach of the Year, and your Player of the Year. So put your thinking cap on. I'm going to write a column about this a little bit later on. So this is your floor, Steve Zerdelian. Tell me, as of this point in time, who your regional Coach of the Year is.
Well, I mean, thanks for giving me all sorts of time to prepare, Tim. I appreciate that.
Did I talk long enough?
Yeah, long enough. Plenty of candidates for this. You can approach it a few different ways. You can look at the teams that were not expected to do anything and have done well, such as Post with John Plefka or Holy Family with Bernadette Lockitis. You can look at the teams that are integrating newer players like Joe Pelican at Malloy. or you can look at some of the teams that have done well this season. And I'm going to stay somewhat predictable, I guess. I'm going to say Missy Traversi with Adelphi, not just because they're undefeated. This is a team that had a lot of talent last year, but they just couldn't put the pieces together consistently all season. Came up short of an NCAA tournament bid. Lots of the same players back. The chemistry is good. Adelphi is a program that has hosted 2 regionals in recent years in 2015 and 2017. Neither time did they reach the regional final. That's unprecedented in this region. Right now they're on track to host another regional. This is a group that has a lot of players that could legitimately say, hey, I should be the featured or the co-featured player. But she's managed to work a 7, 8, 9-player rotation, get everybody involved, give them all chances to succeed in their given roles. And as a consequence, the team has really benefited. So it's just like giving Barbara Stevens the kudos for having great teams year after year. It's not a coincidence. This Adelphi team is doing really well, and it takes good players, but it also takes somebody to put that together on the floor. That's why I'm going to say Missy Traversi right now for my regional coach of the year. In terms of regional player of the year, I haven't seen everybody play, but I'm going to go predictable again. I think it's Shannon Ryan. Some people might look at it and say, well, she's 6'4", she should be good. But it's not that easy. If you ever watch St. Anselm play, Corey Bollard's done a really good job of building the offense to take advantage of her skills. But she works hard. She runs the floor hard. She gets involved on the offensive glass. She's got really light feet. She's got a good touch. She can make a free throw, which is always nice. Sometimes the big players are assumed to be good just because of their size. Well, she's a big kid who works really hard and has got good skills. And when you have the kind of pressure on her to carry a team that won a regional last year to do it again, that's not easy. 9 double-doubles in a row tells me she doesn't take any plays off. I really like what I've seen from her this year. Rookie of the year, kind of a tougher choice here. Again, I haven't seen everybody, so it's hard to say. 2 players kind of jump out at me. Well, I'll say 3 players jump out at me. I'll say Macy Spinks at St. Anselm. I'll say Aurora Deshays at New Haven. And I'll say Mo Moore from Holy Family. Those are the players that I've seen in person to me that have really impressed as freshmen. And all 3 bring slightly different skill sets to the table. For Moore, she's the scorer that Holy Family needs, and I think she's going to be a big scorer for 4 years, assuming she stays healthy. For Deshays, she adds an element of toughness and production inside for New Haven. And for Spinks, she's a great support role player for St. Anselm. She can hit the 3. She's tough on the dribble drive, and she competes really hard. So I'm not going to pick one of those 3. I don't think it's fair. I haven't seen quite enough of them, but those are my 3 that kind of stand out right now, just off the top of my head.
So we went over my top 8 earlier. You can read McCaffrey's musings on d2easthoops.org to get the latest. But here's a chance. We had our early season predictions, or our preseason predictions. Now with our kind of the 40% predictions, we're not quite halfway through the year. So where do you see the top 8 laying out come tournament time?
All right. So, it's interesting. I've looked at the last couple of years, and teams that, regardless of schedule, that have won 2/3 of their games or more by this time in the season. Last year, we had a dozen of those teams. 8 of those 12 made the NCAAs. 2 years ago, we had 10 teams in this category. 7 of the 10 made the NCAAs. So it's hard for me to see teams that are not on this list getting in. Somebody probably will. I'm not sure who, but for me, there are some teams that I'm sure that are going to be in. I'm sure Adelphi's in. I'm sure St. Anselm was in. Bentley's another one I'm saying is in. St. Thomas Aquinas, I believe, does get in. Malloy gets in. And Sciences gets in. That's 6 right there. The other 2 are up for grabs. Now, I'm not exactly sure who's going to get those 2 spots. Pace has given themselves a chance. They're going to have to get some marquee wins. Same as New Haven. Stonehill's another one. If they can pick up some marquee wins, I think they're talented enough to do that. Damon's going to have to run the table. I don't see that happening. Post is going to have to do the same. I don't see that happening. Southern New Hampshire, I don't think they jump over any 10 teams in their way. So for me, those last couple of spots are going to come down to New Haven, Pace, and Stonehill. Maybe 2 of those 3 get in. Which 2, I don't know. But those crossover games and the games between those teams, those are going to determine, I think, in the long run, who gets those last couple of spots.
And the CACC tournament this year is at Sciences, so that's a huge boon for the University of the Sciences in Philadelphia to play in the.
And you know who else is happy about that? All those NE10 and ECC teams that want Sciences to be the only team from the CAC to get in.
I think it's quite possible that the two best teams in that league, especially by the end of the year, will be Holy Family and Sciences. And we've had we talk about in the past the Kelly Killians and the Shelby Rance teams of the mid 2000s, where were some great matchups between Holy Family and Sciences. If that rivalry at its peak was the second best rivalry in the region, in my opinion. And if it can get back there, boy, that's going to mean a lot of fun for the CACC. Now, once Jefferson gets healthy again, you get that three-headed monster, and it could be almost like the St. A's, which developing a rivalry against, not really a rivalry against Bentley because Bentley's won so many of them, right?
True, yeah, but it's interesting. I mean, it's always good to have multiple Philadelphia teams be good. Not only does it highlight the South Division and the CACC, it's just good to have a great basketball city, have multiple great teams. So much fun.
Should mention the best rivalry, it's not close, in the region, is Stonehill and Bentley. I mean, when those two teams play, you should drop everything you're doing and just go, because it's pretty intense matchups in general. So
yeah, I think I kind of know about that. I think I've seen every one since 1984, but that's beside the point.
Well, I mean, there's no accounting for taste. So that just about wraps it up. Final thoughts as we wish everybody happy Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, and Festivus, and a Happy New Year. Final thoughts as we head into the new year, Steve Z.
My final thought is go out and see the teams that are local. Go out and check out some of these games. It's one thing to watch them on video, and that's great because you can't always get to games. But when you get a chance to go and see some of these teams, especially the teams that are doing well, you won't be disappointed. The level of play, the commitment is outstanding, and I don't want to take that for granted. I think all these teams, all these players and coaches, they just work so hard to put a good product on the floor, and they deserve to be supported. So get out and support your local teams, please.
And I'll tell you another to piggyback that. Some of these games, $3 for free for kids under 12. And $5 for an adult. I mean, you're not going to get a better deal than that. You can go get great seats, get your kids into hoops, support the programs, and I think the games are 90 minutes. It's not like you're sitting there for 3 hours. And a lot of times, if you go for the men's game and there's a doubleheader, you can hit both of them. But if you're not watching a Delphi play, or St. A's play, or Sciences play, or Bentley play, or Malloy, and the toll booth, you have to bring exact change for it in Sparkle, but it's still, these are great fun environments where you get to see some really good basketball. And once again, Steve, I have so much fun doing these podcasts with you, and hopefully as time allows, we can do some more.
Well, I mean, that would be great. Again, I would echo that, about being a great product. And if you've got young children, whether it's boys or girls, these teams and these players are very accessible. They're happy to see people there. They're happy to see the kids there. They can go up and have a conversation with them after games for sure, and the players will love it. So the atmospheres are terrific, and hopefully people take advantage of that, and hopefully they continue to enjoy this region and the competitiveness and the excitement that it offers year after year after year. Thanks so much, Steve. We'll talk to you soon. My pleasure, Tim. Good luck. Happy holidays, everybody. And that'll do it for us right here on the D2EastHoops.org Midseason podcast. For my broadcast colleague, Steve Zerdelian, and the music in the background, I'm Tim McCaffrey. Until next time, happy hooping, everyone.